Welcome to the last video on adding activities to your course. This one we're going to focus on adding quizzes, and it will be quite lengthy. There's a very long process in using the quiz feature in Moodle. The first thing that you need to do, again, is make sure your editing is on. And once that's accomplished, then you can locate the week and where you want to add that particular activity. So again, here in Module 4, I'm going to add an activity using the drop-down list. This time I'm going to choose the option to add a quiz. Now the quiz feature is a two-step process. The first thing that we have to do is create the quiz on our course homepage, create the assignment. And then we're going to have to go and add questions to the quiz. So the first thing is, again, give the quiz a name. So I usually tell students to complete the exam one. And then provide some kind of description about it, that in this case I indicate when it's due. Same thing as before, indicate the time frame. If it is timed as far as minutes, maybe they only have 2 hours, you want to make sure that you include that. You can also indicate how many attempts they're allowed to have at the quiz. If you're using categories, assign that category again. Choose the layout. How often do you want a new question to appear? I usually have 10 questions per page. Whether you want to shuffle questions, which is a great idea because you don't want to have students sitting next to each other taking the same test. If you're shuffling the questions, it helps to deter, for the most part, some cheating. Then determine what the students can see after the quiz has been completed. So usually right as they're still working in the test, I only let them see what their attempt was, not whether or not they got it correct or any marks. After the quiz, I do let them see whether or not they got the correct attempt. But because of the timing as far as when I open my quizzes, there's a few days they have available, I don't want to show whether or not the right answer so that they can tell other students. While the quiz is still open, I still only show them maybe the overall feedback. And then finally, after the quiz is closed, meaning all students have had the opportunity to take the quiz, then they can show information as far as what the specific feedback is. In fact, I don't do whether correct on either of those. How do you want this to be graded? 2 decimal places, no decimal places, etc. If you want to restrict access to students, you might choose to set a password for it, but realize if you put a password in, you're going to have to tell the students that password so they can access it. In the feedback, this is where you set boundaries and indicate how they did. So, if they got 100%, great job. Maybe you want to say if they got 80%. And you could, probably be more descriptive than this. Maybe if they got something like 60%, please review, etc. And you can set as many or as few boundaries as you want as far as feedback, and you can add more feedback. And then go ahead and save and display, because once you've created the course, all you've done is create the assignment that now appears in your gradebook and on the course homepage. But until you add questions to your quiz, the quiz is not functional. So once we've created the quiz, we can go in and edit the quiz. So when we click Edit the Quiz, we have the option to add questions or add a random question. Now the problem is you have to have a question bank first. So if you have a content package from your publisher, you can import those questions into Moodle, and those questions will appear in your question bank. Maybe you have a test generating software that came with your instructor resources like ExamView or one of those, that you can create the quiz in their program and then export it from their program and bring it into Moodle. Or you can just create quiz questions within Moodle. It's entirely up to you. So if we click here on to show the quiz question contents, we can click on the button here to create a new question. And it's going to ask us what type of question are we creating. So for instance, maybe we want to choose a true-false question and click Next. Then we'll go ahead and give the question a name. Cover letter question 1. And then type in whatever the question is that you want the question to be. And then indicate what the correct answer is. And then again, feedback. So, you know, when you're providing assessments, you want to make sure that the students are getting feedback as far as whether they got the answer correct, or maybe it was not correct, but here's why it's not correct, etc. Once you put in all those details, you can save your changes. And now I have one question in my question bank, so that now I can add that question to the quiz. So when I click on the little checkbox here, I can select it, and then I can indicate to add to the quiz. And now in my quiz, I have the one question here for a true-false question. Indicate how many points they'll receive for answering that question, so that's the grade column. So maybe it was a 2-point question, and save it. By default, the questions are usually available at 1 point. You also might want to indicate what the maximum grade is for this quiz. So depending on how many questions you have and how many points each of those questions are worth will help you to determine your grade maximum. And then you'll continue to do that. Build your questions first would be my suggestion, and then go through and add those questions to your quiz one at a time. Or if you have multiple questions, you can select multiple checkboxes and add them to the quiz. Another thing is, if you've created questions for another quiz, you want to make sure that you're naming them appropriately so that you're not putting questions, because a question bank is for your whole course, not just for one quiz. So you want to make sure that you're either creating groups of questions or labeling them so they're specific to a topic. I like the add question randomly feature, so when I have multiple questions that I can choose from, maybe they're all about cover letter formats, but they're all worded a little differently. I can choose a group of questions and say add, you know, 5 questions from these randomly to the quiz, which means then students, when they're taking the quiz, every student potentially is getting a different quiz. So again, I can deter any cheating in that sense as well. Once you have all the quiz questions entered into your quiz, you might want to click on the tab at the top that says Order and Paging, and this will show you exactly how your quiz will lay out, and you can rearrange questions if you're not having them shuffled, move them around, maybe take a question out by clicking the delete button. Once it's complete, then you can go ahead and leave your quiz questions here. And the way to do that, notice there's no other than to save the points, you know, save and close or save and return to course. You just simply click on your breadcrumbs up here at the top, back to the quiz, and you can see now that it doesn't have the option for you to go in and edit the quiz. So you want to be very careful that when you're preparing the quiz and adding the questions, that you have all of the questions ready to add at that moment, because it's very difficult to go back in once you leave the question adding phase. So get all your questions compiled first and then leave. Now when I go back to my course home shell, I will see the quiz that I just added to my course.